So, yeah, okay. We are live. What is up, everyone? Hope everyone's having a good day. Today we're going to talk about Freud, and this is really by mere chance because this video came up on my feed today, so I figured I might as well go through it because I think Freud is an interesting individual. I think Freud is someone that is deeply flawed, whether it's personally, whether it's with his ideas. But I think he's almost a necessary evil to get to the likes of Jung. And that's really what I see it as. I see him as the bridging of the gap between philosophy and psychology. And I think without him, you don't get the insights of Jung, you don't get the development of a more respectable field of psychology, and thus, it's like you have to take the good with the bad. And I don't know if this is going to get into his personal stuff. I don't know if this is going to get into personal scandals, but they are pretty gross, pretty disgusting. In terms of Freud's ideas, I think he was extremely closed-minded on accepting something beyond comprehension. I think he wanted to put everything into one box or the other. You can see this through his dream analysis. His dream analysis is it's very boring. It's very not descriptive. It likes to use the same symbols and think those symbols mean the same thing in every context and in every different individual. And this is something very different from Jungian dream analysis, where in Jungian dream analysis, you must understand each person to understand what each symbol means to that person. And when you read the interpretations of dreams, it's so boring. It's flat out so boring. But there's a few interesting ideas. Basically, Freud says that every single dream you have has some connection to your last thing you did during the day or some part of the day. It basically picks up where you left off. So there is some sort of tie, and like it might be difficult to spot, it might be very hard to understand, but your dreams are very much representative of what you did that day. There's also different things that can affect you. So like think about when you are sleeping and someone pours water on you. If someone pours water on you while you're sleeping, in the dream you might be under a waterfall, you might, fall off a cliff into a lake or like, you know what I mean? It's like we all have experienced things where like someone's poking us and in our dream we're getting attacked. Like he had interesting ideas like this. And where I think he really thrived is when he was talking about his theories. I think it kind of diminished the more and more rigid it became and the more and more analytical it became.
Neurologist, most popularly known as the founding father of psychoanalysis, a set of theories and therapeutic techniques used through dialogue between a patient and a psychoanalyst.
Interestingly enough, Freud and Jung both started out as hypnotists, and you see a lot of this in their foundational practices. I mean, what are dreams aside from impressionable moments? And that's really what they took from these more archaic practices.
A sort of talking cure in order to study the unconscious mind and as a method of treatment for mental disorders. Although it had been discussed before, Freud was the first person to popularize and structure the concept of the unconscious, despite
Freud said that every great poet understood the unconscious. I think that's very, very evident in reading some older works. When you see Nietzsche, Nietzsche seems to hint at this. Nietzsche seems to hint at the collective unconscious and the archetypes through his idea of why we have morality and sorts of things like this. It's always hinted at, but it's never quite coined in this way.
repeated criticisms of his work, he became recognized as a profound thinker in his age and left a remarkable intellectual legacy. You have probably come across the term Freudian slip before, an error in speech that occurs due to the interference of an unconscious subdued wish or internal train of thought. He called dreams wish fulfillment. His theory proposed
You, it's called wish fulfillment because it's the idea that you live out your wishes in your dreams. You live out what you want to do in your normal life in your dreams.
that dreams are a byproduct of the dreamer's physical and mental state during sleep and distinguishes between
So this is why your dreams have an indication of what you need to do, because it's a sign, it's a symbol of what it is that you're missing out in your life. Like if you constantly see yourself public speaking in your dreams, there's probably an aspect of yourself that wants to get in front of a crowd. There's probably an aspect of yourself that wants to perform, that wants to put their ideas out there. But you are neglecting to do this in your day-to-day life. So it's manifesting through your dreams.
Manifest dream, the actual literal subject matter of the dream, and latent dream, the underlying meaning of these symbols. The latent dream being the real dream, and the goal of dream interpretation is to reveal it through concepts such as condensation, reduction,
So the reason why we can't understand our dreams, this is how Freud explained it. The reason we can't explain our dreams is because it doesn't comply with like the normal laws of physics. It doesn't comply with the normal laws of order and how things appear. And because of this, we can't really make sense of it. Like it would be as if you, hopefully you don't speak Chinese, so this analogy will work. But like if you open a book that's written in Chinese, you're not going to understand it. It's just going to be symbols to you. And because it's just symbols to you, because there's no meaning behind it, we can rarely piece out what it is that our dreams are telling us. And it's this randomness, it's this weirdness, it's this little bit that's outside of our grasp that makes it hard for us to interpret most of our dreams because they're so chaotic, they're so out there, they're so weird, they're so expressive, and usually we can grasp a little bit of the dream. We can never quite get all the details, but the details we can get, if we can get breadcrumbs from those details, then we can find out a lot about what you're dealing with, a lot of what you are struggling with, and the things that you need to set right in your life.
and simplification of rich contents of latent dreams, and displacement, an unconscious process that transfers emotions, ideas, and wishes to diminish anxiety. For Freud, the psyche is composed of the id, ego, and superego. The id is the unconscious instinctual component of personality that is present at birth. It is the source of bodily needs and wants, emotional impulses, and desires. Freud believed there to be two fundamental human drives, the life drive and the death drive. The life drive, or libido, acts according to the pleasure principle, characterized by eros, as well as procreation.
It's very, very similar to Schopenhauer. This is almost an offshoot of Schopenhauer. So Schopenhauer said the will to live, and what are the two fundamental aspects of survival? It's survival and procreation. It's the idea that you must survive and the idea that you must procreate in order to live forever. And I'm pretty sure I haven't read Freud's actual theories on anything aside from dreams, but I'm pretty sure it's everything is based off of these two things. Every element of human nature is derived from this. And it's very much a bad reading of Schopenhauer, but
Social cooperation, and survival. It is oriented to the immediate gratification of impulse and desire and an avoidance of pain. The death drive is characterized by thanatos, which represents death and self-destruction. With instincts such as aggression and risky behavior, the ego acts according to the reality principle. It seeks to please the id drive in realistic ways that, in the long term, bring benefit rather than grief. It allows one to delay gratifying immediate needs and function effectively in the real world. The superego reflects the internalization of cultural rules taught by the guidance and influence of parents, institutions, and ideal models. It works in contradiction.
so these ideas are very similar to Jungian ideas of the unconscious, but I think when it comes to Freud, Freud doesn't allow any room for the fantastical. He doesn't allow any room for the inexplicable. And I think to do this is to deny an aspect of human nature. I think people exist beyond comprehension, and to make it and put it into a box is very much limiting and very much limits your ability to give a proper treatment. And this is very much juxtaposed to what Jung was advocating for. Jung advocated for in The Undiscovered Self that every person is their own universe, and you must treat it as such in order to give them the best treatment. And basically, what this is saying is like, whatever you think as a doctor, whatever you think as your own outside observer, you must see it from their side. You must see what they're dealing with. You must see how they're interpreting things. Because it's only when you can see it from that person's perspective that you can give them the analysis, you can give them the help that they're going to understand.
To the id, it strives to act in a socially appropriate manner, whereas the
Think of Freud as like the doctors that will, the moment there's something wrong, they'll just prescribe you a drug. They want to give you a quick fix. They want to give you the thing that will cure the symptoms. Whereas Jung was more about getting to the root cause of it, getting to your individual issue that is causing the problem. And there's probably a cost benefit analysis to this. There's probably, is it worth it to invest this amount of time? Is it worth the energy? Is it actually going to help? There's probably arguments for both sides on which one's better. But to me, it makes reading Freud very dull, and it makes reading Jung very exciting.
The id just wants instant gratification. It controls our sense of right and wrong and guilt, helping us fit into society by getting us to act in socially acceptable ways. Thus, the id is the set of uncoordinated instinctual desires, the superego plays the critical and moralizing role, and the ego is the organized, realistic agent that mediates between the instinctual desires of the id and the critical superego. Although the id is unconscious by definition, the ego and superego are both partly conscious and partly unconscious. In founding psychoanalysis, Freud developed therapeutic techniques such as free association, which is the method of listening to patients speak for themselves, working through their own material rather than parroting another.
I think I might be wrong about this, but Freud in some way manipulated where he was sitting so that it almost was like the patient was having a daydream. So the patient didn't feel like they were talking to anyone. It was a expression of their own um, ideas. It was boundless. It wasn't filtered in any way, and it's very interesting.
Other suggestions. It is the content of consciousness without censorship, as an aid in gaining access to the unconscious processes. Another important phenomenon is transference, in which a person unconsciously projects feelings onto other people, such as transferring feelings about one's parents to their partners, or mistrusting somebody who resembles an ex-spouse.
This is almost like the idea of projection, like you see someone hurt you in the past, so you believe that everyone's gonna hurt you. It's that idea.
In manners, voice, or external appearance. Psychosexual development is central to the psychoanalytic sexual drive theory. Freud believed that personality developed through a series of childhood stages, during which the id's libidinal energies become focused on different areas of the body. The development of a
So basically, what he's about to say is there's different stages where people become stuck. There's different stages where people become repressed. There's different places where people are not able to have a healthy or a normal response to. And this is where all neuroses come from. So Freud had this called psychosexual theory, and it's the idea that everything wrong with you derives from repressed sexuality, some sort of repression of this essential force for humans, essential idea of what it means to be a human and live. And to some extent, it's correct. To some extent, it's right, but it's not the end all be all. And I think that's the one caveat with Freud. It was like it's like everything was derived from this one topic.
healthy adult personality is the result of successfully completing each of the psychosexual stages. However, if the child experiences frustration, it might lead to fixation, which is the persistent focus of the id's pleasure-seeking energies at the early stages of psychosexual.
This is why Freud, like, he's about to explain something like the first stage is the breastfeeding stage, and this is the first thing we experience, and this is why Freud said that we eat from circular plates because it replicates the same experience.
Development. These
Like, if you've ever eaten from a square plate, does it not taste worse? That's I think that's the strongest
issues
argument for that.
occur when an issue in one of the stages remains unresolved, leaving the individual essentially stuck or fixated at that point of development and unable to move on to the next, causing them to experience anxiety that would persist into adulthood as a neurosis, a
What's up,
functional
Rupert?
mental
How's
disorder. The
everything?
first one is the oral stage, which starts from birth and lasts around a year. The infant's mouth is the focus of libidinal gratification derived from the pleasure of feeding at the mother's breast and from the oral
This morning?
exploration of their environment.
Damn.
In this stage, the id dominates, because neither the ego nor the superego is fully developed, and every action is based upon the pleasure principle. the ego is slowly forming as the infant starts to develop a body image and delay gratification. Weaning, or the process of gradually withdrawing the infant's supply of its mother's milk and introducing it to another diet, makes the infant lose the physical intimacy with their mother. This increases the infant's self-awareness that they do not control the environment, and thus learn of delayed gratification. Issues during this stage may cause the infant to develop an oral fixation during their life.
So, like, it's so funny because if you see someone chewing a pen or you see someone smoking a cigarette, be like, "Oh, your mother didn't give you enough attention." And it's a funny thing to say, but to some extent, it's correct. To some extent, that's what an oral fixation is.
Characterized by immaturity, passivity, and unrealistic optimism. The second stage of psychosexual development is the anal stage.
I said that to my friend, and he got sick. He was like chewing a pen, but like his pen was like, it wasn't like normal chewing. It was like almost bitten in half, damn near. And I'm like, damn, dude, did your mom not give you enough attention? And he got like really self-conscious.
Spanning from the age of 18 months to 3 years. Controlling bowel movements is the child's key experience. It results in conflicts between the id, demanding immediate gratification, and the ego, demanding delayed gratification, in eliminating bodily wastes. Fixations at this point in development can lead to what Freud called anal retentive and anal expulsive personalities. In the anal retentive personality, the
Think of anyone that like feels the need to mark their territory. It's the easiest way to put it. That's someone who's stuck in this stage.
parents may have overemphasized bowel movement control, which can lead to the development of a compulsive personality, a person too concerned
Think of like how dogs will pee on a certain tree or they'll do something in a certain area. It's this idea. It's the need to like show your dominance through this.
with neatness and order. In the anal expulsive personality, an underemphasis on controlling bowel movements can lead to the development of a self-indulgent personality and environmental disorder. The resolution in the id-ego conflict is in the child's adjusting to parental influences, teaching the value and importance of physical cleanliness and environmental order, thus producing a self-controlled adult. However, it must not be developed with the parent's will, which creates a weak sense of self, but with the child's ego. The third stage is the phallic stage, which occurs from the ages of 3 to 6 years. In this stage, children become aware of their bodies and the bodies of other people, learning the physical and sexual differences between male and female. The decisive experience is the Oedipus complex, which originally refers to the sexual desire of a son for his mother while focusing emotional rivalry against his father. It is a desire for the parent in
This comes from the play. I think it's Oedipus Rex. It's a very interesting play actually,
both males and females, and that boys and girls
where
experience
the king, he finds out through a prophecy that he married his mother and killed his father. And this is where Freud gets the
differently.
term
Boys in
from.
a form of castration anxiety, girls in a form of penis envy. This creates an unconscious psychological defense mechanism that reduces
The fact that it's like he has a theory called penis envy is the funniest thing ever. Like imagine you're in high school learning about psychology and you see that in the textbook. I would laugh so hard.
anxiety arising from unacceptable or
I'm laughing
potentially
right now as
harmful
an adult.
stimuli. The first defense mechanism is repression, the blocking of memories and emotional impulses from the conscious mind. The second defense
Repression is just not letting something out to the surface. So like it's not necessarily something negative. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like you're violent or you're a vicious person, but like most of the time it's just unexpressed emotion. Most of the time it's just you don't want to be an outcast in society, so that's why you repress things. Could also be from a traumatic experience where it's something you don't want to remember and it's something that you kind of forget, something you block out of your mind. But most of the time it's just the repression is because you're not going to fit in if you be yourself.
mechanism is identification, by which the child incorporates to their ego the personality characteristics of the same-sex parent. Freud considered this to be the successful outcome of the complex. The fourth stage is the latency stage, that spans from the age of 6 years until puberty, wherein the child consolidates the character habits they developed in the 3 earlier stages. Whether or not the child has successfully resolved the Oedipus complex, the instinctual drives of the id are inaccessible to the ego, because their defense mechanisms to repress them during the phallic stage. Hence, because said drives are latent, hidden, and gratification is delayed, the child must derive the pleasure of gratification directing the libidinal drives towards external activities, such as school, friendship, and hobbies. The last stage is the genital stage that spans from puberty through adult life. Its purpose is the psychological.
Notice how all of these are around some sort of sexual development. That's really where I see the issue with Freud. I think it's not the sole cause of everything. I think it's certainly something, but it's not everything. And that's really where Jung and Freud kind of break apart. Jung thought there were deeper explanations. Maybe it's like tied up in that because of it's the easiest way to express emotion. It's the easiest way to express energy through those sorts of desires. But it's not what you see at the higher ends of individuals.
Detachment and independence from the parents. The ego established in the individual shifts from instant gratification to gratifying desire through responsibility, family, friendship, and relationship. However, a psychological fixation can lead to great difficulty in forming a healthy sexual relationship with another person. Although many of Freud's assumptions have been brought into question since the advent of his work, he remains the father of psychoanalysis and a significant contributor to understanding human personality.
I think for the most part, a lot of his things have either been disproved or kind of built upon. But it really, the thing is with Freud is it allowed for sort of the starting of psychology becoming respected, the starting of psychology becoming something that was not really a pseudoscience. It was becoming something that was respectable. What's what's
What
this?
is the meaning of life? It is likely that you have asked yourself this question before. This is known as an existential crisis, a state in which you re-examine your life in the context of death and are impacted by the contemplation of the meaning, purpose, or value of life.
Existentialism, put very simply, is the idea that you assign value to your life. The idea that you have the ultimate responsibility and thus you have the ultimate ability to give your life meaning or give your life lack of meaning. And a a healthy existentialist is someone that can find happiness in the small things. It's almost how the Taoists break down the issues with the world and kind of avoid them. This is the good stage of an existentialist, but existentialism that's unevolved can lead to nihilism, which nihilism is the denial of any meaning of anything. And there's not really any happiness in that. Sure, there's like nihilism light, which is absurdism, which is the idea that nothing has value, nothing has meaning inherently. And we kind of just have to laugh at this. We kind of have to laugh at how serious everything is and find joy in the small things, find joy in the things that we can experience today.
Existentialism is a philosophy that explores this problem of human existence, with an emphasis on the individual who starts in an apparently meaningless world, and who seeks to create meaning in a world without inherent meaning. Existentialism is most commonly associated with several 19th and 20th century philosophers.
I think it really starts with Dostoevsky. I think Dostoevsky is one of the earliest people they consider an existentialist. But Dostoevsky really wasn't an existentialist. Dostoevsky was really warning people about the destruction of values and there should be a return to Christian morality. And that's something that's not really understood with him. And like that's his end goal. That's what he thought the solution was. Which there's something to that. I mean, C.S. Lewis is perhaps the strongest defender of Catholic ideals, and he does make several strong arguments, but I think Emerson's idea of keeping the past in the past and evolving beyond our limitations is also an inspiring thought.
Søren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus. However,
Camus was not an existentialist. Camus was an absurdist who usually gets grouped in with existentialists, but it's a little bit different. Existentialists try to assign meaning and try to assign value, where Camus believed that there was no meaning, but this is what gave the world meaning. Like, think about it this way: if the world has no meaning, then that's how it should be. Because if you have free will and there's meaning and there's purpose, that means you have to do something. That means you have to be something. That means you have to be a doctor. You have to be a lawyer. You have to be this. You have to be that. Whereas if everything's meaningless, you have no responsibility to be anything. So it gives you the ultimate freedom to be who you are. And that's really what Camus was talking about. That's really his discovery. And it's almost a Taoist idea in a sense. It's almost the idea that in the nothingness is everything. In the littlest of moments is the greatest of happiness.
Many of these thinkers never used the term existentialist to describe themselves. Some of them even rejected the label, while others accepted it. What they did share is a common template. Many of them regarded traditional systematic or academic philosophies too abstract and remote from concrete human experience, and focused on the authenticity of the individual. Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard is regarded as the father
Kierkegaard's very weird because he was a Christian existentialist, which you don't think the two would combine.
of existentialism, who, along with Nietzsche, provided the basic foundations of 19th century existentialism. Dostoevsky is a key figure as well. Although he was a novelist more than a philosopher, he was one of the
Dostoevsky's weird because I mean, really the only philosophy he ever wrote was the first like 40 pages from Notes from the Underground. And then even that, it's almost written in jest. It's almost written through the perspective of someone who's all but given up. And it's weird because his characters aren't expressly speaking philosophy. They aren't expressly giving you their ideology, but you can kind of parse it through the dialogue. And that's really the genius of Dostoevsky.
first to properly define key existentialist ideas. Walter Kaufmann declares, "It is as if Kierkegaard had stepped right out of
This is Walter Kaufman is the guy that like translates most of Nietzsche's works into English. Like most of the versions of Nietzsche you get are translated by this guy. He does a fairly good job of it.
of Dostoevsky's pen. Thus, existentialism is not just about philosophy, but also combines together into novels, literature, and poetry. Notes from the Underground is one of the most important works of existentialist literature, where Dostoevsky attempts to justify the existence of individual freedom as a necessary part of humankind. He argues that the abstraction of ideologies has no basis in what one actually is, and that makes a person live an inauthentic life. One of Dostoevsky's existential messages is that the purpose of life is to act properly by being authentic to yourself. Kierkegaard's work focuses on the individual as well, highlighting the importance
That's really what you find about most great philosophers. It's about becoming yourself. It's about stepping out on your own and believing what you believe because it's you. It's authentic. It's not conforming for the sake of conformity. It's not
of
conforming for the sake of
subjectivity,
safety.
personal choice, and commitment. Although he was a Christian, he was very critical of Christendom, which was represented by the Danish established church, who made people live falsely religious lives. People became so absorbed in the crowd that they became mere numbers of a herd.
I think Kierkegaard was of the idea that to be a Christian is to live like Christ. And if you live like Christ, you don't need to do anything else. You don't need to worry about anything else. And that's something I agree with.
When religion is
That's really Nietzsche's greatest critique of the church. Nietzsche said in one of his, I can't remember what work it was, but he said Jesus was the last Christian, meaning that Jesus was the last person that upheld the Christian beliefs. He was the last person that lived a life that Christians swear they live by. And most people go to church and then forget everything. Most people go to church and not actually live up to the doctrines. And not saying you have to be perfect, but like there's not even an attempt. There's just the idea that like if I keep doing this thing, then eventually I'll find it. But it's like it's almost like when a rich person donates to a charity for what social acclaim they'll get. It's not a real authentic gesture. It's not a real authentic devotion. They don't change the aspects of their life that don't conform to the ideology. They just say that they'll do it. They just say that they'll do this. It's very weird.
is integrated into society, the social scene becomes the religious scene, and for that reason, religion had died. Kierkegaard suggests that the only way out of existential angst is to take a leap of faith towards Christianity, emphasizing a personal relationship with God.
So the idea of the leap of faith is the idea that like you have no proof, But this is where the excitement comes from. Like Kierkegaard said something along the lines of like anxiety is the only reason human beings do anything. And if we're not spurred on by anxiety, we're not spurred on by the unknown, nothing will ever be accomplished.
The subjective truth of the individual. It is the ultimate irrational experience, which is the most rational thing to do. Nietzsche, on the other hand, was completely disillusioned with religion, announcing that God is dead. He calls Christianity slave morality.
So he said God is dead and man killed him because he believed the ideals were no longer being followed. Nietzsche really didn't have a problem with Christ or his message. Nietzsche had a problem with the church and the institution. And that's really a weird distinction that I don't think people really get because they want to read in so much. Like, dude, I was reading a review today of the Nietzsche book I'm reading, and it was just like it became a rant about modern day politics. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Like, if you understood Nietzsche, then you would understand Nietzsche is a fierce individualist. That's who Nietzsche is. Nietzsche doesn't believe in any group. Nietzsche doesn't believe in any morality. Nietzsche sees that reality is subjective and you must live in a manner that you can be all you can be. That's really the summation of all of Nietzsche's philosophy. And to take anything else is idiotic. To read into his social commentary is idiotic because he's doing it for the sake of showing you that you can be more, showing you that you are conforming, showing you that you are limiting yourself through your own practices, through your own beliefs, through the things that you follow blindly and don't question. That's really what Nietzsche's philosophy is about. And I think it sucks because Nietzsche was like used by different political movements. Nietzsche's been used by different institutions to say this, to say that. Um, Nietzsche's his sister who published The Will to Power like was big in getting the book into the hands of the 1940s German government and really skewing the message and really destroying the reputation of Nietzsche and destroying and bastardizing the message. But he's just against conformity. That's what he's against. What's up, Environment? How's everything,
Which
man?
resents the virtues of the powerful and promotes turning the other cheek. He wanted to create life-affirming individuals,
Morning.
calling
Where are you at? It's not morning. It's 8 p.m. here.
for a master morality, which does not intend to oppress others, but rather create new values and ways of life through
So the master morality is it's the idea of becoming all that you can be for the sake of the evolution of society. So like there's an idealized version of yourself where you made the right decision every time and you're a strong, you're a successful, you're a happy person. But we are falling short of this ideal because we are conforming for the sake of fitting in. We're conforming for the sake of being part of this group or being part of this group or following this or following that. Australia is 10 a.m. Dude, how are the spiders like actually that big? I'm like terrified of Australia because of like the animals. I feel like the koalas would be cool and like the emus and the kiwis. Like you guys have some really cool animals, but those spiders and the snakes just terrifying.
a revaluation of all values, giving way to the figure of the Übermensch. Thus man becomes God. It is interesting to see the profound doctrinal differences between the thinkers, even while sharing a common template. Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard were theistic thinkers, while Nietzsche was atheistic. The term
So that's the whole point of it. Existentialism is a personal philosophy. And I think that's what a lot of people get wrong with these ideas.
existentialism was actually coined in the mid-1940s by Christian existentialist Gabriel Marcel, who focused on the modern individual struggle in a technologically dehumanizing society. Marcel later came to reject the label he himself had coined, to dissociate himself from figures such as fellow French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, preferring the term Christian Socratic in honor of Kierkegaard's work with
This is a weird thing that you see. Like most intellectuals, most great philosophers reject the titles that are given to them. Like Khalil Gibran was called a philosopher, and he's like, I'm not a philosopher. Um, who's another good example? Camus was called a existentialist, and he's like, no, I'm an absurdist. He was also called an atheist. He's like, I'm not an atheist.
With Socratic irony, Sartre adopted the existentialist label and greatly helped popularize existentialist thought. He proposes the famous maxim, existence precedes essence. Ancient Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle believed that essence precedes existence. Every human being is born with an essence. That is what gives us the properties of being a human being. This is known as essentialism. Sartre flips this around and tells us that we are a blank canvas, that we create and make ourselves through what we do, and thus exist.
So Sartre, I think that's how you say it. Sartre was interesting because he said that you have the ultimate responsibility in everything. It is ultimately your fault for everything in your life. You always have the choice. And I thought this was a very interesting idea. I don't agree with much else of what he said, but that's probably the most fascinating part.
Existence precedes essence. In this way, our life is a work of art. However, this freedom also becomes a slightly horrifying realization. Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. Martin
And this quote right here is the biggest problem people have with existentialism. This is why people don't want to become themselves because this is such a scary idea. It's so much easier to point the finger and blame other people for why you're not where you are. It's so much easier to join a group and feel like there's safety in numbers, but at the expense of yourself, you gain popularity. At the expense of yourself, you gain the safety and the safety of numbers. But what good is everything if you don't even have yourself? And that's really what an existentialist is trying to explain to you. It's that the individual is limited by everything it conforms to. And the less you conform, the more you are yourself. It's like how many responsibilities are we willing to take on? Yes, yes.
to the world, he is responsible for everything.
And this is why so many people are scared today. This is why so many people are neurotic today. This is why so many people are so willing to join a cult or a religion or a group or a movement or a protest. It's because if you can point the finger to why the world isn't the way it is, then it takes the responsibility from you. It takes the blame from you. And people do not want this level of responsibility because it means that they're wrong. It means that they failed. It means that they went somewhere astray at some point in their lives. And this is a haunting fact for many people. It's much easier to point the finger than it is to look in the mirror and say, I'm the reason why I'm not exactly where I should be. Or I'm the reason why I'm not taking the exact steps to get to where I want to be.
Everything he does. Martin Heidegger is another important existentialist who talks about the idea of thrownness, that we are all thrown into the world, arbitrarily born into a given family, within a given culture, and at a given moment in human history. These givens are facticities. The tasks we decide to be constantly engaged in and care about have very little to do with us. They're sort of decided for us by the particular facticity that we were born.
So I think it's a little bit of both. I think we have a responsibility, but we're also given a push in a certain direction. And it's interesting because I sometimes think like if I was born in another country or in another state, like what beliefs would I have? Would I be an entirely different person? I don't know if I'd be an entirely different person, but I feel like I'd be different. And it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, what if you grew up in a family with opposite values? What if you grew up in a family with a different religion? Would you be the same person that you are today? Would you make the same decision? And the truth is, you wouldn't make the same decision, so you'd be a different person. Maybe your essence, maybe your soul wouldn't be different, but who you are externally would be different.
Into. We are thrown with neither prior knowledge nor individual opinion into a world that was there before and will remain there after we're gone. Sartre would tell us that freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. He was very influenced by Heidegger's masterpiece, Being and Time, publishing his own book
I have
titled
this
Being
book,
and Nothing.
Being in Time, but it's like 800 pages, and I don't feel like reading it right now. The next thing I'm going to read after I finish The Will to Power is I'm going to read this book because it's by a guy that I keep seeing on YouTube, I keep seeing on Instagram, and he talks about marketing and he somehow makes it interesting. And I just discovered I have this book. I don't remember buying it. I feel like I've had this for a year. I don't remember why I bought it, but I have this book, so I'm gonna read it at some point and let you guys know what I think about it because it seems cool. I like the things he talks about. I think he's a fairly interesting guy, so hopefully it's a good book.
However, Heidegger distances himself from Sartre's existentialism due to major differences in their ideas. Once you realize that you are completely free, the responsibility that follows and the infinite possibilities that are open to you creates a sort of dread. It leads many people to adopt what Sartre calls bad faith, a way of denying the fundamental nature of our freedom and responsibility and accepting something as true that might not be convincing but that is convenient and easy for us to believe in. He gives the example of a way.
So what I was just saying was, what's up, Zachariah? How's everything? Basically, what I was saying is that when you have the ultimate responsibility, it's something that you want to deny. And this is what he's talking about, the idea of bad faith, the idea of joining a political movement because you think it's going to solve things. The idea of joining this group or this group because you think that if you're part of this thing, then you can affect the world in a positive way. But the truth is, the only way you can affect your world is if you make the best decision for yourself, is if you start to actively make the changes that are going to get yourself out of your current situation.
Waiter who does not enjoy his job but goes to work every day and assumes the role of a waiter without being fulfilled. And when he thinks of applying to a different job and all the difficult questions that would come along with that sort of life choice, he convinces himself that it would be better to just remain a waiter. This is similar to Kierkegaard's idea that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. One may possess the
Being off grid costs about $1 a day. Are you off the grid? Please tell me you are. I'm like interested. I want to hear about this. Doing good, man. Same stuff new day. Isn't that all we can ask for, though, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes the monotony is like peaceful. Like I'm in a period where a lot of stuff's changing, and it's like it's just annoying because I don't have the same amount of time to focus on the things that I want to do.
ability to freely act, but if one never uses it and thinks about an endless sea of possibilities, one is
You do?
effectively not
What's the setup like? Don't say anything you don't want to say, but like why'd you decide to do that? Like is it just something you always wanted to do? You read Walden and you're like, yeah, I gotta go do this. Do you live in like the what is it called? It's not what's the uninhabitable part of Australia called? I don't remember. The outback? Do you live in the outback?
not capable of freely acting. One gets lost in the infinite, as Kierkegaard puts it, and lives a totally unimaginative everyday life. The other part is getting lost in the finite, that is, not considering enough possibilities and just mindlessly going around the demands of culture and social expectations. People live a complete lie. They live because of what everyone tells them that's what one does. This can
So think of decisions that you made because other people told you to do them. Think of how many people go to college and find out it's not where they want to be and drop out, but they only went because everyone told them it would be a good idea. I mean, I feel like we all know people like this, but these are people that at least had the courage to admit that it's not for them, but that there's a lot more people that base their decisions off of what the world tells them, what their parents tell them, what society tells them, and not what they tell themselves. Not what genuinely would make them happy, not what they evaluated to be something that would inspire them to live a better life, inspire them to have a fun and a happy existence.
can be a scary realization, as most people are not aware of this. They see everything they do as their own choice. Similarly, Heidegger tells us that inauthenticity occurs when we embody only our facticity, the reality we've been thrown into,
Dude, are they like kangaroos and stuff? Like you gotta talk about like what you see, like what crazy shit goes on. I'm so interested now.
and are
This is more
foreigners,
interesting than
falling
the
into
video.
tasks that other people tell us to do. One becomes das man, the they, surrendering one's existence to a formless entity. Instead of choosing to do something that we want, we do it because that is what they do. Albert Camus was an acquaintance of Sartre. However, the disagreements between them emerged quickly, and they eventually split. Camus is considered to be an existentialist, even though he firmly rejected the
He's more of an absurdist, I
term
think.
throughout his life. He contributed to the rise of the philosophy known as absurdism. Camus describes the absurd as the conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life, and the human inability to find any meaning in a purposeless, meaningless, or chaotic and irrational universe. Man
I think Camus' greatest idea, or one of them, is the idea of imagining Sisyphus smiling. The idea of finding happiness in the monotony.
and seeks for meaning, only to receive the unreasonable silence of the universal response. Camus states, I do not believe in God, and I am not an atheist. This reflects the notion of the absurd. The search
That's
of
cool.
the
What do you do
possibility
you
of the
do you
existence of
farm?
God
Like
is
do you have your own food? That's how you're able to do that. Everything's paid off. Like how
humanly impossible,
I feel like this is a dumb question, but like how is that possible? Do you like work remote? Like what do you do? I'm just interested.
but this also entails that the proof that God does not exist is impossible too. The myth of Sisyphus is a fierce expression of the absurd. Sisyphus is the absurd hero, condemned to a lifetime of rolling a large boulder up a hill, only to reach the top and have the boulder roll back down to the bottom for him to start all over again for eternity. This incredibly vivid imagery is an allegory of the human condition, of our futile search for meaning in an indifferent and meaningless universe. While working on the same mundane tasks, we all had to push our own boulders, only to
Every time you solve a problem, there's a new one. Every time you make a sale, you need to make another sale. Every time you do something, the next thing is already there. It's this idea.
watch it roll back down. Although all this only scratches the surface of existentialism, it can serve as a guide to explore its diverse thinkers, with core ideas such as authenticity, individuality, subjectivity, freedom, and responsibility, in order to understand and pursue the meaning of your life.
I think existentialism is a pretty interesting philosophy. I think it fails in certain regards, and I think it really depends on the existentialist you're reading how interesting it is. But it's definitely one of those philosophies that is somewhat inspiring. Maybe we can get through one more. We'll talk
Frog in
Kafka.
1883 to Franz Kafka is regarded as one of the greatest
Kafka is like my favorite um, author of literature, I would say. And it's purely because his style is so out there. It's so non-conventional. It's so Kafka, for lack of a better word. And it's the fact that he never was successful during his lifetime that I think makes his writing so great. Because he was never given the acclaim, he was never given the fame, he was never given the success, unless it made his stories depressing. It made them subversive. I think if he was given an editor, the editor would force him to curtail certain things. It would force him to tell the story in a different manner. And even the fact that all of his novels are unfinished, I think gives a very, very interesting um I think it makes the trial interesting. The trial is like his best work, I think. But I think it makes it more interesting that it's unfinished because it abruptly ends. And I think it's a perfect summation of that whole book. I think it makes complete sense in the grand scheme of things.
literary figures in recent history. He is known for his uniquely dark, disorienting, and surreal writing style, a style and quality so particular to him that anything that resembles it has come to be known and referred to as Kafkaesque. To understand his writing and the qualities of Kafkaesque, it is helpful to understand his early life. Kafka was born in Prague in 1883 to a man named Hermann and a woman named Julie.
His father was like a tyrant in his life, and like there's a few stories that are like pretty horrific, but like overall, his father was just someone that was never proud of him. And you can see this in his writing, you can see this in his personality, you can see this in his letters as well. And there's an interesting story, I think, what is it? It's called The Judgment, where basically Kafka it's like a self-insert, and the character is basically the character is basically like debating whether he should tell his father that he got engaged and whether he should tell his friend as well. And basically the father is like ill and like he's supposedly dying, and then the son is going to take care of him, and father basically begins to regain his strength and regain his health when he begins to yell at the narrator and basically forces the narrator to jump out the window and dive into the river in shame, and that's how it ends. And it's like when you think about it, it's like it's clearly just a self-insert for his relationship with his father. And at one point Kafka wrote like a 50-page letter to his father, but was so afraid to send it to him that His father never read it.
Father was a highly successful, well-to-do businessman who, through sheer force of will and a brash, aggressive personality, managed to rise from the working class, build a successful business, marry a well-educated woman, and become a member of higher middle society.
So Kafka's father was like a working man that wanted Kafka to become an intellectual, become a success, I mean, Kafka was a lawyer, but he wasn't a particularly successful one.
As parents tend to do, Herman
He
hoped for
never
a child
quite
that would
lived
measure
up
up to
to
his ideal
this expectation.
stature of a person. Franz Kafka was not that. Franz was born a small, anxious, and sickly boy, and he mostly remained that way. As a result, through no fault of his own, Franz would become a great source of disappointment for his father and a sort of psychological punching bag for him as he attempted to mold Franz into who he wished he was, but could never be. Throughout his adolescence, Franz developed an urge to write as a means of dealing with his increasing sense of anxiety, guilt, and self-hatred. Of course, his father did not
He never liked anything he wrote. He, I think it was with the trial, he put the trial in a shelf and was like, I'm never touching this again. And it's like his best work.
allow him to pursue writing and ultimately define the borders around Kafka's life, forcing him to pursue law as a profession. During his time studying law in college, Kafka continued writing and met one of his only real friends, Max Brod, another writer who would eventually convince Kafka to publish
So this guy was his basically the reason why we have any Kafka. And what what Max Brod did was when Kafka died, Kafka said to Max, burn everything that I've written. And basically this guy, instead of following his wishes, he decided to publish everything and kind of edited everything together. And this is why we know Kafka's name
his first three
through this
collections of
guy.
work. These pieces sold very poorly,
Some people theorize that Max wrote these stories himself.
however, and essentially went unnoticed. After college, Kafka would go on to work in a law office and then for an insurance company. Here, Kafka would become subject to long hours, unpaid overtime, massive amounts of paperwork, and
So basically what the trial is about is it's about the legal system and how it's unfair and how it's influenced by judges, by lawyers, by court reporters, by even the painter who paints the paintings for the judges. And it's really an expression of Kafka's dissatisfaction with his job, his dissatisfaction with his life, his dissatisfaction with giving a fair judgment to people. And I think it's perhaps the best example of, do we actually have fairness? Do we actually have justice? You know, it's really a masterpiece.
absurd, complex bureaucratic systems. Kafka was understandably miserable. While working at the insurance company, Kafka continued writing on the side, producing some of his most notable pieces, including The Trial, The Castle, and America. He did not attempt to
America it's really funny. The Trial is really good, and The Castle was an attempt to combine the elements of both The Trial and America, but I really didn't like it that much. I thought it wasn't as funny as America, and it wasn't as horrific and deceptive and confusing and all over the place as The Trial.
publish any of these at the time, however, and even left much of his work unfinished, believing it to be unworthy. Kafka continued working at the insurance
None of his
company for the
novels were
majority
ever finished. His short stories, I think a lot of them are finished. I have the book, all his complete short stories.
of his remaining short life, while continuing to write around his work schedule. In 1924, he died of tuberculosis at age 41. Kafka never went on to publish any more of his writing, nor did he ever personally receive any success or recognition for the small amount he did. He died believing that his work wasn't any good. On his deathbed, he even instructed Max Brod to burn all of his unpublished manuscripts following his death. Obviously, Brod did not follow Kafka's instructions, because here we are, 100 years later,
Sia Zachariah, Peter Crone. I have no idea who that is.
talking about him.
I'll look him up at
After
some
Kafka
point.
died, Brod spent the following year or so working to organize and publish his notes and manuscripts. Over the decade following, Kafka would become one of the most
It's so funny that like only 10 years after his death, Kafka is like the most famous writer in all of Europe. And you have the likes of Camus like raving about how good these works are.
prominent literary and philosophical figures of the 20th century. In other words, one of the greatest writers and thinkers of the century lived his life with his work buried in some drawer, aware, unaware, or indifferent to the fact that he was sitting on some of the most significant works in recent history. He lived his life in the eyes of his father, an inadequate disappointment, and yet in the eyes of history, he is an immensely important individual. One can only wonder how many individuals like Kafka have and continue to walk this earth, completely disconnected or restricted from ever seeing who they really are or could be. How many Kafkas have lived and died without ever
So there's almost like a, I don't like to say this because it's like it's a tragic existence, but I think this tragedy birthed some of the greatest art we've ever seen. And the truth is, Kafka went out happy. And he doesn't talk about it here, but there's a story called A Hunger Artist, and I'll explain the context of it, I'll explain what it means, and I'll explain why Kafka died happy. So the Hunger Artist is a story by Kafka. It's very short. If you're interested in the summation of it, I think you should read it because it's very inspiring. But basically, the Hunger Artist is a guy that starves himself publicly for the sake of his art. This is his form of expression. This is his form of, you know, wowing a crowd. And it used to be very popular, but as time has gone on, it's become less and less popular. And as it's become less popular, he's drawing less crowds, and eventually he's relegated to being at a zoo. And even at the zoo, nobody's coming to see him. And he breaks his own record of not eating food. And in his dying moments, he forgets how many days that he's even not eaten for. And he tells the guy that comes and finds him, like, you know why I did this? It's because I never liked eating food. And he dies almost with a smile. He dies knowing that he got his greatest accomplishment and no one was there to see it, but he still did it. And the context of this is that at the time Kafka was on his deathbed dying of tuberculosis, and this is the thing that he's editing as he's dying. And it's the idea that Kafka didn't need the accolades. Kafka didn't need the success. Kafka was creating for the sake of creating. The expression of his art was enough. And that's really why I find Kafka so inspiring, because it's the idea that you create things for you. You don't create things for other people. Think of why most art is shit today. It's pure shit. It's pure garbage. And it's because everyone is creating things for other people. Why are movies so bad? It's because we have to fit these narratives. We have to not insult certain countries. We have to not insult certain corporations. We can't say this. We can't say that. They're trying to please so many people that they end up pleasing nobody. That's why every work of art, that's why every song, that's why every movie is garbage today. Because it's not real art. Real art is true creative expression. True creative expression, and not expression for anyone else. Expression for the sake of expression. Art for the sake of creation. That's really what's missing in the world. That's really what's missing in creativity. That's really what is missing in all of these mediums of any sort of creativity. It's doing things authentically. It's not having an editor. It's not being afraid that you're going to upset someone. It's not being afraid that someone is not going to understand it. That's why we have such shitty movies. That's why we have such shitty books. That's why the music is so terrible. That's why TV is so terrible. It's because of this. But that's probably my most inspiring
Sharing their
stuff.
voice with the world, whose voice would have changed it forever. How many people never know who they'll be after they're gone? Fortunately for everyone other than Kafka, his work was saved and an entirely new genre of thinking and writing developed in his name, Kafkaesque. Generally, the term Kafkaesque tends to refer to the bureaucratic nature of capitalistic, judiciary, and government systems, the sort of complex, unclear processes in which no one individual ever really has a comprehensive.
That's not really true. Kafkaesque is it's weirdness. It's a style of writing where things go wrong, but not in the way you think they're going to go wrong.
Grasp on what
Not all of his stories even talk about these ideas.
is going on, and the system doesn't really care. But the quality of Kafkaesque also seems to extend much further than this.
That's how his novels are structured, but not his stories. His stories are much
It is not
different.
necessarily exemplified merely by what these systems are, but rather the reaction of the individual subjected to them and what it might represent. In one of his most famous novels, The Trial, the protagonist Joseph K. is suddenly arrested at his home one morning. The officers do not inform K of why he's being arrested, though, and he is then forced
This is my favorite story by him. I think it's his best.
through a long, absurd trial in which nothing is ever really explained or makes much sense. The trial is riddled with corruption and disorderliness, and by the end of the novel, after having meandered the entire thing, K is never told why he was arrested, and yet he remains guilty of his final conviction. In another one of his more popular stories, Metamorphosis, the
This is his probably his most famous story, and I think if you haven't read this one, it's really worth a read because it's about like I want to say 70 pages, maybe 80 pages, and It's so weird. It's so weird. It could either be taken as a frightful tale or a profound allegory. And that's the best part of Kafka. It's similar to how Orwell in Animal Farm creates something that everyone can understand. It's a fun story, but it also says something with it. It's very similar. It's very similar. Like it could either be taken at face value as just a weird story or a profound allegory to our diminished capacity. And do people love us for us, or do they love us for what we can do for them?
Protagonist Gregor Samsa awakes into having suddenly been turned into an insect with no clear explanation. The first and recurring issues Gregor faces throughout the novel are the problems of getting to work, dealing with his boss, and providing financially for his inconsiderately needy family. Gregor, of course, cannot do this. He is a bug, and so he experiences increased dread trying to deal with his situation while becoming a useless nuisance to his family. In both stories, the protagonists are faced with sudden, absurd circumstances. There are no explanations, and in the end, there is no real chance of overcoming them. They are outmatched by the arbitrary, senseless obstacles they face, in part
So it talks about the randomness of life and how things that we think are in control, things that we take for granted, can be thrown up in the air at a moment's notice.
because they can't understand or control any of what is happening. The crux of Kafka's style and work seems to be carried by this confrontation with the absurd, a conflict in which a character's efforts, reasoning, and sense of the world are met with inescapable parameters of senselessness, wherein success is both impossible and, in the end, ultimately pointless, and yet they try anyway. It's fair to argue that one interpretation is that these circumstances are emblematic of Kafka's take on the human condition. Specifically, the unyielding desire for answers and conquest over the existential problems of anxiety, guilt, absurdity, and suffering, paired with an inability to ever really understand or control the source of the problems and effectively overcome them. But the kicker and perhaps most important part is, even in the face of absurd, despairing circumstances, Kafka's characters don't give up, at least initially.
There's no, the thing about Kafka is there's no resolution, there's no solution. The characters kind of just have to accept it in the end. It's almost like The Stranger, where the final act of defiance is being angry at his captors.
They continue on and fight against their situations, trying to reason, understand, or work their way out of the senselessness. But in the end, it is ultimately to no avail. Perhaps in this, Kafka is suggesting that the struggle to find solace in understanding is both inescapable and impossible. As conscious, rational beings, we fight against the absurdity, trying to resolve the discrepancy between us and the universe. But ironically, we only serve to self-perpetuate the very struggle we are trying to resolve by trying to resolve the unresolvable. And in this sense, on some level, we almost want the struggle. Of course, this is just one interpretation. Ultimately, because of its vague, surreal, and inexplicable quality, Kafka's work lends itself to nearly as many interpretations as readers.
That's why you gotta love Kafka, because I feel like everyone has their own personal experience with the work. And when you can hit at a universal archetype like that, then you really did something special.
Perhaps the idea is that we
This is another problem with modern art. They don't understand archetypes, they don't understand symbols, they don't understand what we perceive as a hero's journey, what we perceive as a good person. They will tell you that someone is a good person. They will tell you, oh, wow, this person's so smart. They won't show you, they won't exemplify anything. They'll just say it. And it's that idea. It's the lack of actual proof that diminishes the modern
should
artist.
accept our absurd condition and not take it so seriously. Perhaps the idea is that we should and must struggle against it. Or perhaps the idea is that we can't know what the idea is. In truth, only Kafka will ever have known exactly what his work meant, and it's fair to speculate that in some sense, perhaps not even him. What is undeniable, though, is that Kafka's work has left a lasting impact on literature, philosophy, and humanity at large. It has helped readers around the world feel less alone in their
If you've never read any Kafka, you can get a lot of it online for free because he died so long ago. And that's really the greatest part about him, is that it's so accessible.
own hunches of truth and moments of Kafkaesque experiences. Kafka's own story is not necessarily unusual. His father, although cruel, his life, although sad, neither were nor are all that uncommon. To be born into a faulty family, bad place in the world, or a weak body or brain. To live and die having never recognized one's full potential. To have been stuck in a bureaucratic cog of a business organization or government system. To have felt the guilt and anxiety of existence for no clear reason. We've all, at least at times, experienced the Kafkaesque. Kafka's work is not considered great because it describes something profoundly unique, but because it describes something mundanely common in a profound way. An encapsulation of an
It's almost like James Joyce, in the sense that it describes the individual experience. It doesn't describe something lofty that's beyond our current existence. Like, think of, Shakespeare, or think of anything that's much older. It's always telling the stories of great people, of distinguished people, of people that are not common folk.
often indescribable experience, a part of life that touches us all. When referring to Kafka, writer Anne Rice once said that his work helped her realize the following approach in her own work: don't bend, don't water it down, don't try to make it logical, don't edit your own soul according to the fashion. Rather, follow your most intense obsessions mercilessly. Kafka's work sought not to alleviate the soul through remedies of false hope or delusion, but rather through the direct confrontation with the darker aspects of self. By distorting reality to map more accurately onto his own sense of human experience, he revealed a certain remedy of unhindered self-examination.
So it's very unlikely that you'll get the same level of success as, let's say, like a, oh my God, what's her name? The chick that wrote Harry Potter. I blanking on her name right now, but you'll never get that kind of success writing something like Kafka, but you will get the respect. You will move people individually at a level that a work like something that's so popular could never do. And that's really the idea of it. Like Nietzsche is not understood by most people, but by the people he's understood by, he's a great thinker. Emerson is not someone that is extremely popular today, but the people he's popular with are inspired by him to a degree that is beyond anything that is congruent with any other author. And it's that idea. It's like, don't curtail your meaning because the meaning is the most important thing. Don't become a victim of your own success. Don't become a victim of trying to fit in, trying to be popular.
And carved out a place in the world for others to do the same. I think we ought to read only the kind of books that wound or stab us. If the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? So that it will make us happy? Good Lord, we would be happy precisely if we had no books, wrote Kafka in a letter to a friend. Although he might not have shared this explicitly, Kafka's work embodies and reminds us not that we wish to give up, but that despite all the absurdities and problems, we wish to continue. We wish to struggle against the universe and forge our own way. We wish to find and connect over honesty, however hard it may be.
That was a really good video. With that, I'm gonna head out. I'm starting to lose my voice, and I got a few things I gotta do. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys so much for having fun. Catch you guys in the next one.